get a top 8 finish here, but Keaton Gill is going to do everything he can to make sure that he is the one getting a victory in this round.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty close matchup, at least on paper. You have, of course, Iron Hands EX up against those single prize Pokemon like Comfey and Cramorant, but Spiritomb can stop the Raikou V a little bit, sometimes that Lumineon V, and then Giratina is just very consistent at what it does, takes big knockouts in one hit.
Yeah, and as we're thinking of this matchup, there's a lot of pieces to consider. Keaton's got lots of different attackers, the Miraidon, the Iron Hands, as we see one being laid out into the prize cards. There are a couple in this list. That one Flappy being prized is not ideal. There is just one copy here. But he's also, of course, got Raichu to maybe close out things at the end of the game. And Dan, with plenty of attackers as well. Greninja, Cramorant, the Giratina V-Star, and Sableye, of course. So many different options for each of these players. Who would you have to give the advantage to when we're looking at just this matchup on paper?
I'm a Miraidon guy. I love Electric Generator, being able to just cheat those energy in play. So
17 basic energy in Keaton Gill's list, by the way.
yeah, which is different from the other Peony lists we've seen where it's 16 and that double
One
turbo
double
energy.
turbo, right?
So maybe that 17 can boost it up a little bit more.
Each energy card you play increases your odds every single time. Here we go. The players shaking hands. We're getting into this Swiss round 14 match. And what a top deck for Dan Hugar. That Battle VIP pass. Wisely, though, choosing to use concealed cards first.
Yeah, using concealed cards here before the Battle VIP pass will allow you to try to draw into those basic Pokemon before you search them out of your deck with that Battle VIP pass. And you see just there, Dan finding that Comfey, has the Jet Energy and is going to Flower Selecting yet again. And this is going to be a big point of contention for the matchup as well, is Path to the Peak.
Huge thing
Three
to
copies in the list and found one off that Flower Selecting.
It is pretty unfortunate to have to lose a Psychic Energy. Those energy cards are very precious. Just 13 in the list here for Dan. And of course, every time you attack with Giratina V-Star, it is very energy intensive. You have to Lost Zone 2 of them with the Lost Impact. And then eventually, of course, get enough cards in the Lost Zone to get to the Star Requiem. Dan going to take a moment here as he checks this deck with the Battle VIP Pass. Take notes, make sure he knows which cards are prized, what he has available, and what he does not. With one Comfey already being used and him going first, what do you expect to see Dan bench off the Battle VIP Pass? I do believe Cramorant was already in the hand.
If Cramorant's already in the hand, you're going to go and grab at least another Comfey, maybe a Giratina, but with the Jet Energy, it allows you to get an extra Flower Selecting when you usually don't have it available. And there is, with the prizes, nothing too bad, at least from Dan's side of things. The one Psychic Energy is a little bit worse now since you got one removed. But having just the one Comfey in there, and yeah, you see here, Comfey and Giratina V, you can even get an energy attached to that if you want, or save it for concealed cards for next turn. It also depends on if Dan drops that path right now.
Yeah, and I think you probably should be dropping the path as Dan. Keaton's deck is basically entirely reliant on abilities, be it the Miraidon's tandem unit to find some partners to put onto the bench, or be it the Fleet-Footed from Raikou V in the active, or even Squawkabilly's Squawk and Seize. Those are cards that Keaton will not have access to unless he can find a counter stadium. Dan now retreating into this other Comfey, Flower Selecting once again, top 2 cards. Looks like a Pokegear as one of the choices, and I think potentially a Nest Ball has to debate what is better. No, it is Switch Cart going to the Lost Zone. Those Switch cards are ever important. Looks like he is holding on to a couple in the hand. Path to the Peak coming into play. We've mentioned how good that is, and it is just a pass over to Keaton's side.
Now, Dan did opt to keep that Grass Energy in the hand, not attaching it to Giratina.
Had already attached the Jet Energy to the Comfey,
that's right, that's right.
Yeah, and that's why Jet Energy is so good. It kind of functions as 2 Switch cards. We do see Keaton benching the Miraidon. Would love to use the tandem unit, is unable to, however, and just has to go with that Electric Generator. Can we see a hit here?
Just the one?
Just one single energy card. Better than none, that is for sure.
At least having the Peony in hand, you can attach for turn here. And Peony for the stadium to bump that Path to the Peak, because that's doing so much work stopping your tandem unit right now.
An incredibly good card for sure. Keaton was debating playing the Escape Rope, I think, before playing this Peony. Of course, you do have to discard your hand when you play this card, and then you get to search your deck for 2 trainer cards, reveal them, and place them directly into your hand. So this can get a counter stadium, can get that Path to the Peak out of the way, so tandem unit can be utilized. Maybe something like the Squawkabilly. So what do you think we would see here? Potentially Beach Court and Battle VIP Pass, those
Yeah.
seem pretty solid.
Yeah, those are the two cards I would want to go for. That allows you to grab that Squawkabilly EX that is sitting right there at the top of the deck search for Keaton here.
Taking a moment to check the prize cards. We see all the best players doing this at the time, and sure enough, Beach Court Battle VIP being brought to the front, and then you can not only get 2 Pokemon in play from this Battle VIP Pass, but you'll be able to use Tandem Unit once this Beach Court comes out. Keaton making note of that Flaffy being prized, I'm sure. You really don't love to see that. That is the risk you run when you play just a 1/1 line of a powerful support Pokemon like that.
There was an option for Keaton to play the escape rope before playing the electric generator.
Sure.
Being allowing you to get that energy on the Raikou V instead. And with Beach Court, which you are already going to search out, allows you to retreat that Miraidon EX for free.
That could have been really strong. Trying to get the turn 1 attack is pretty nice for Keaton. I think ideally he'd like to Iron Hands this turn, but that is a lot to ask for, and especially when you've already used 1 electric generator.
Well, here is the Tandem Unit fetching out that Iron Hands EX. Such a powerful Pokemon in this deck, being able to help you keep up on the prize trade with that Amp You Very Much attack.
It's really what has made Miraidon so much stronger in this format. Miraidon was already very powerful and very popular for a lot of our players. And we did see JW Kreewall getting wins with the deck. We saw Jesse Parker with consistent finishes with the deck as well. But besides a select few group of players, Miraidon, for its meta share percentage, really did not perform as consistently as you would expect. That is not the case any longer with Iron Hands powering it up. Electric Generator now from Keaton, looking at the top 5, looking for some energy cards, and no! Energy's found once again.
Maybe we should be playing 20 basic lightning energies.
That's what you got to do. Just keep upping it every single time. Give yourself every time you completely miss a generator, you add 1 more energy to your list. That's the game.
And with each missed generator, it makes me think of having played that escape rope to where you could charge up that Raikou just to start this prize trade.
And unfortunately for Keaton, off that restart, did actually even draw in to 2 lightning energy cards. So that made those hits from the generator all that less likely. We see the attachment to Squawkabilly, and that Squawk and Seize. Looks like we're going to be seeing a Motivate this turn from Keaton. Definitely lackluster.
Not as good, but still able to charge up something like that Iron Hands EX. And it's been unfortunate with each of the draws here. Keaton has drawn off the restart, has 2 energy electric generator. Now off the Squawk and Seize has a 3 energy electric generator. There we see the fleet-footed and a retreat to this Squawkabilly, and we're going to see that Motivate most likely charge up that Iron Hands EX.
That's exactly what Keaton is going for. Just 20 damage laid onto the Comfey, pretty irrelevant, and probably will be switch carded off anyway. And now it's over to Dan, uses that concealed card, putting a Grass Energy into the discard pile, finding that Colress's Experiment and the Spiritomb. Pretty strong, getting that Colress. That is the name of the game here on turn 2.
Yeah, this Giratina deck is still just a Lost Zone deck, so trying to cobble together those Colress's Experiments is going to be very good. And wow, 3 basic energy, that Giratina V-Star, and another Colress's Experiment in that Colress's Experiment.
Pretty tough Colress to find there. I think you definitely have to lose the V-Star. You've got 3 of them. You really only need 2 to get through the game. But those energy cards and the Colress. Colress is probably the best card in the entire deck. You gotta feel like you need to hang on to that. With 2 energy cards already in the Lost Zone, Dan may start to feel a little bit of pressure a little earlier than he would like in this game.
Here we see that Flower selecting. The option is between Jet Energy and another card here.
There's
Switch
a
card.
switch card. Dan could possibly get to 7 this turn. He would need to find yet another Comfey. We see 5 now being in the Lost Zone. This 1 more Flower selecting. So we could see a Lost Impact here.
Giratina V-Star and Path to the Peak. Those are 2 cards you do not want to see off this Flower selecting, especially after a Path already getting bumped and a Giratina hitting that Lost Zone.
Yeah, it really is unfortunate, but I think there's really no choice for Dan. You can't Lost Zone 2 Giratina V-Star. You probably are going to need 2 of them if you want to come out on top in this game. We do see that Cramorant hitting the bench. That is able to attack with that Spit Innocently attack. It's got that Lost Provisions ability, of course, that lets it attack for free. And Dan making use of Keaton's own stadium, that Beach Court, reducing the retreat cost of that Comfey. And we're seeing that Cramorant come up. Bird-on-bird action, 110 damage onto Squawkabilly EX.
The bird's the word, and that 110 damage is not going to be for nothing, as you have Sableye later in the game that you can pick off this Squawkability EX on the bench if you want.
Keaton now looking at his hand, debating what to do. He has an electric generator in the hand. I think it was there last turn even. He chose not to play that. What do you think of that decision? Most players, when they see a generator, they just slam it pretty much instantly.
Listen, after hitting a 1 off of the 2, you kind of get demoralized. And it's nothing that you want to see when you play the third one and also don't get anything. So might as well try to thin the deck out as much as possible and hope to just give yourself the best odds on the following turn. You already have kind of a setup with that Motivate from turn 1, so it's not going to be too bad. You can even attach to that Iron Hands EX and just arm press for last resort if you want. And here we see that Mareep being found off that tandem unit.
Prepping to hopefully take the Flaffy off the prizes, and Keaton here really would like to hit at least 1 energy off this generator and is lucky enough to find 2 finally. Dan even cheering him on, it sounds like. 2 energies. I think we got to power up that Iron Hands here, right?
Listen, Chip, luck has nothing to do with it. This is all calculated. And there we go, 4 energy on that Iron Hands EX, ready to go and start this prize trade off right with an Amp You Very Much. We're going to start charging up that Mew EX. That is one of the cards that, ever since it came out, people were like, oh, Giratina V-Star is done. Mew EX, you just genome hacking and lost impact, and it's over. You're not going to be able to set up. Giratina's out of the format, no longer good. As we see now, that's not the case.
I like this attachment here to the Mew because you allow yourself the opportunity, if you take Flaffy off the prizes, to pull off that genome hacking attack on the next turn. Keaton taking 2 prizes. Amp You Very Much. Goodbye to the Cramorant. And back over now to Dan. Several energy cards here in the hand. Looks like 7 or 8 cards already built up here in the hand. Has a Pokegear as well. Gonna kick it off with the concealed cards, finding 2 more. There's a counter catcher. That could be an option if Dan is scared of the Mew EX. Plenty of different plays that Dan could go for, and that's one of the reasons so many people like this deck, because you have the breadth of options, but only one is the correct play. What do you think we're going to see Dan try to achieve this turn?
You need to knock out that Iron Hands EX. Just because if you counter catcher that Mew, take the knockout with that Giratina V-Star. Yeah, sure. Iron Hands EX will not be able to take a knockout back on that Giratina, but there's so many escape rope in Keaton's list where just a single one fetched off a Peony will allow you to Amp You Very Much something like a Comfey or that Radiant Greninja on the bench, and then you just did nothing for your turn.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the Iron Hands. It does force you to deal with it, because if you don't, your opponent can just Amp You Very Much once again. And if you do deal with the Iron Hands, your opponent has other options in play that can take out your Giratina. You see Flower selecting once again for Dan. Does have to Lost Zone a Chorus, but it is in favor of hanging onto a Mirage Gate, one of the more powerful cards in the deck as well. If you have 7 or more cards in your Lost Zone, you get to search your deck for 2 energy cards of different types and attach them to your Pokemon however you would like. And I think we've got a Mirage Gate incoming. Super Odd first to put those energy cards back.
Yeah, pretty important that Dan has multiple Super Odd in the hand, just being able to recycle those energies. But even with a Lost Impact here, is going to be put far behind in the energy count at least. And there is 10 in Lost Zone, so you can go ahead and use that Star Requiem.
That is true.
Star power.
Yeah, it could be a decent option as well. I think if Dan was going to go for the Star Requiem, it would have been nice to see him spread the energy out a little bit. So this might signal he wants to go for Lost Impact and then pull off a Star Requiem on a future turn, which I guess could make sense as well. It's a little easier to get to a Star Requiem than it is to get to a follow-up Lost Impact.
And we're going to see a Jet Energy here to help ease that Lost Impact and promote that Giratina V-Star to the active. We do see the counter catcher, though, and I guess with the bench of the Giratina V, it is a little bit of leeway against an escape rope and that Amp You Very Much.
The thing is, though, with the bench of the Giratina, Miraidon can be the option to take that out. It's still reasonable for Keaton to find 2 prize cards this turn off of a escape rope. We see that Lost Impact sending 2 more cards to the Lost Zone. Well over 10 now at this point. Goodbye to that Mew EX, the threat that Dan was certainly scared of. And especially with Keaton having already discarded his Raichu. That's one of his other ways to deal with the Giratina is the Raichu. So maybe if he can find Super Odd, we could still see that be achieved this turn. We do have to, of course, remember, even though Mareep is in play, you know, Dan's making decisions like Keaton can get Flaffy this next turn. He doesn't know that that Flaffy is prized, but we have that knowledge. We're aware that Flaffy is not available at the moment, so that makes it a lot more difficult for Keaton to pull off really any meaningful attack besides amp you very much.
Yeah, honestly, with just the 1 energy on the Miraidon EX, it's going to be a little rough to charge that up this turn as well. And Dan playing it to where his bench is not full. So that means Raikou V will not be able to take down that Giratina V. But we do see that Stadium Bump is going to be pretty beneficial, hopefully, for Keaton here.
Stadium Bump right away into the fleet-footed. And now Escape Rope. Dan has a decision to make. Keaton would love to see one of those single prize Pokemon come to the active, and I think Dan is actually going to do it.
Oh, wow.
What do you think of that call?
This is going to help Keaton out a lot. You can amp you very much this Radiant Greninja, get another turn to charge up that Miraidon EX, and then hopefully finish things off with a boss's orders. But this is going to be speeding up the game a lot.
Yeah, and if Keaton could get Raichu into play right now and put an energy card on it, that would feel really strong, I feel like. Or at least get a Super Odd so that you have the option to get back the Raichu. But as I'm looking through this list...
Yeah, there's no Super Odd in this list.
There actually isn't, yeah. That's something you see from time to time in these Miraidon lists. I know Nick Robinson was playing it when we saw him on the stream yesterday. Looks like Keaton not playing it. That Raichu being discarded early on in the game could be really tough for Keaton to overcome.
So basically how this is going to play out is Iron Hands EX will be able to take 2 prizes off of this Radiant Greninja. But then this Giratina V-Star promotes to the active, and you can Star Requiem that Iron Hands EX, and then it's going to put a ton of pressure on Keaton to be able to cobble together a 2-prize knockout on that Giratina V on the bench if it doesn't get evolved into a V-Star.
And that's going to be the big thing Dan is trying to accomplish on the next turn. If he can put 2 288 HP Pokemon in play, Keaton is going to have basically no option to close out the game besides powering up yet another Iron Hands EX. He does play 2, but we know 1 was prized, and I actually do think it was at the top of the prize cards.
Again, having that Flaffy and Iron Hands EX is going to probably come in huge here. You did see that 4 Sealstone fetch a card for Keaton. Has the Lost Vacuum to get rid of that 4 Sealstone, just thin the hand down a little bit.
Yeah, maybe prepping for a potential Iono, something along those lines. And we're seeing that Luminion, and he's going to go for his own Iono, thinning before, trying to make things as difficult as possible for Dan. I think he's crossing his fingers that Dan is unable to find a Giratina V-Star, which honestly could happen. There's not many ways in this deck to find Giratina V-Star. In fact, the only way to do it is just to draw into it naturally, be it through flower selecting or Colress's Experiment. Dan has 1 Giratina V-Star in play, and 1 we know is in the Lost Zone.
Well, the 1 card found off that Star Alchemy from the Forest Sealstone was the last electric generator and hits double lightning off of it. So now it can fully power up that Miraidon EX or that Raikou V. And there we see that energy on the Miraidon. So setting up a pretty good checkmate here, at least with the attackers on board. Iono is going to shuffle back that hand for Dan, which we knew had that Giratina V-Star in hand.
And the fact that it's going to the bottom is going to make it even more difficult for Dan to find it this turn, hoping off of these 4 cards from Iono that he'll have a way to shuffle the deck. And Keaton drawing into boss's orders. He's got things lined up to just win the game next turn. We'll have to see if Dan can find that key evolution. Now Keaton retreats into this Iron Hands. We're going to see the Amp You very much. Taking another 2 prize cards. 4 prizes taken by Iron Hands for Keaton so far in this game. And in most matchups, if you take 4 prizes with Iron Hands, you feel like you are nearly unstoppable. But Dan has found a way to put himself in a favorable position.
Keaton going to thin out the hand a little bit in preparation of something like a Roxanne from Dan's side of thing. And at least with the 4 cards, it did look like there was a Roxanne in hand.
You see the Squawkabilly being added to the hand for Keaton. Amp You very much takes the KO. Looks like Flaffy was added to the hand. Pretty nice, but that Iron Hands remains in the prize cards. Dan here with a new hand has, I think, an Avery. That's a tech you don't see too often from Giratina. And as you mentioned, Roxanne is in hand as well.
And I do love playing this Nest Ball just so you could shuffle the deck, get that Giratina V-Star hopefully back in the swing of things instead of on the bottom. And Sableye could be a great way to close out the game with that Squawkabilly EX on the bench.
Yeah, that damage from earlier being incredibly relevant to clean up at the end game, just like you mentioned when it happened, Jeremy. Now Dan needing a switch card, needing that Giratina, and it looks like he's thinning out as many of these Pokemon in hand as possible. Doesn't want to draw into any of those pieces. Has an energy card, but not choosing to attach it just yet. It's going to just be that Roxanne. Since Keaton has taken at least 3 prize cards and has 3 or fewer remaining, both players will shuffle their hand into the deck. Dan gets 6, and Keaton only gets 2.
And we got oops all cards on the table. This Roxanne has been a powerful supporter for this Giratina V-Star deck in combination with a Path to the Peak. Granted, all those Path to the Peak are gone now, but most of the abilities that Keaton would use are already pretty much used up. That Lumineon V already on the bench.
That's true.
Basically, only the Fleet-Footed available.
Yeah, Mew EX already being knocked out as well. It's going to be onto the Fleet-Footed more than likely, and Dan is able to find that Giratina V-Star. We see the nod of the head. Pretty happy to see that, but he does not have a way to retreat this Comfey. Oh, no, that Beach Court. Yeah, can't forget the Beach Court. Doesn't need a switch card. No energy needed to retreat it. Ready to go. Flower selecting. Ooh, it's an energy and a Mirage Gate. A Psychic Energy at that.
The last Psychic Energy, I believe.
Yeah, I think he's got to keep the Psychic Energy so that he can Sableye, right?
You have to.
Maybe if he thinks there's another Super Odd left, he could get rid of the Psychic Energy. But yeah, let's hang on to that. And then there is still one in the prizes that we will see most likely taken here.
And again, you're going to be Star Requiem this turn, so you're still going to have those energies on the Giratina. You can just attach Lost Impact for your last 2 prizes if everything goes smoothly. But there we go. Dan tying it up now, 2-2, and has the board that looks like it will be able to handle anything that Keaton can throw at him.
Yes, Keaton thinking, what is my win con? What is my path back into this game? And he is just gassed of all of his resources, the Mew EX, the Raichu, his main ways to deal with a Giratina V-Star already in the discard pile. We do see the Flaffy and the Peony in the hand, a pretty strong hand for Keaton to get off of the Roxanne, but no way to take a one-hit KO.
No Raichu. That would be game over right here.
If he could work in a single prize attacker and hope that Dan doesn't have a Psychic to attack with the Sableye, that might be Keaton's one win condition. If he could power up the Zapdos as an attacker, for example. But he's used so many Electric Generator, I don't even know if there's one left.
Yeah, found the last Electric Generator off that Forest Seal Stone the prior turn. So has no real options to charge up something like that Zapdos. Bravery Charm won't have any real effect here. You can boost that Squawk ability to what?
Yeah, it would have 80 HP
100
left.
left,
Yeah, with the Switch card. He's thinking about grabbing Switch card out as well. It would have 80 HP left, and you add the Bravery Charm to it. Try to make it hang on as much as possible, but all Dan needs is an energy card to just Lost Impact. And if you're just as Keaton here promoting a one-prize Pokemon and letting it go down, take a hit, whatever it may be, feels pretty tough. Draw for turn, draw for the Fleet-Footed, I should say.
Still not able to really cobble together a knockout. We see the Squawk ability being promoted here.
Just cross your fingers that Dan doesn't have the energy card needed.
Still has the Switch card, so Switch card into
the Miraidon and just going to swing.
Now this will put the Squawk ability to 130.
Yeah, so it does not go down.
Lost Mine.
Does not go down to the Sableye, but we know Dan has the Psychic Energy in hand. All he has to do is attach Lost Impact, take his final 2 prizes, and Dan Hugar wins game 1 here in our Swiss Round 14.
Pretty easy fashion, at least for your setup, having exactly what you want. Just Lost Impact, Star Requiem, Lost Impact. That's how you draw it up when you're a Giratina. Meanwhile, Keaton needs a little bit of help off his Electric Generator, and discarding that Raichu early meant he did not have an attack during that last turn.
Yeah, when he discarded the Raichu, part of me wondered if he should have just benched it before using that Squawk ability. I think he was worried about what his bench would look like. He knew he wanted to go for the Iron Hands, but if you don't have access to either the Mew or Raichu to take a one-hit KO on a Giratina, this matchup is really difficult to win, and that is exactly what we saw play out in this game.
Yeah, bringing up that Mew EX with the counter catcher proved to be one of the best plays Dan could have done. Although there was no Flaffy for Keaton there, You never really know. And just bringing up that Giratina V-Star with the Star Requiem all ready to go, taking the knockout on that Iron Hands EX, getting him up to 2-2, and pretty much sealed it there with that energy in hand. And moving on to game 2, Keaton's going to probably go second.
Yeah, I think you would choose to go second. I guess if you go first, I think Keaton maybe will choose to go first because he doesn't play double turbo energy in his deck. It's pretty unlikely he gets a turn 1 Iron Hands going second. If he goes first, it's pretty likely he gets a turn 2 Iron Hands, I think. And then also on Keaton's side, he would expect that Dan would have a hard time really doing too much on turn 1. Needs to have exactly a Colress's Experiment pretty much in the hand.
1 Raikou V in the prize cards for Keaton, along with 3 Lightning Energy, meanwhile a couple Energy, and a Super Rod Mirage Gate for Dan. And Keaton is going second, so Dan going to start things off with the Flower Selecting.
Gets rid of that Avery. Once again, a tech that we're really not used to seeing in this Lost Zone deck. And he has a Battle VIP pass, pretty solid. Going to get the 2 Pokemon out of the deck. A couple energy cards in hand as well, which is pretty nice. Has some options. Greninja, Cramorant, Comfey, Giratina. What would you like to see on Dan's side here from this first VIP search?
If there's a Jet Energy, I love double Comfey. It allows you to use 3 Flower Selectings in 1 energy attachment. If not, I do love that Radiant Greninja, just being able to consistently draw a couple cards, a little bit better than Flower Selecting, at least in resource management-wise. And it's all about finding that Colress's Experiment for next turn.
Yeah, I think there is already even that Colress in hand. So Dan, feeling pretty nice about what he is working with so far. The thing about Giratina that is pretty awkward is that it's a little tough to actually even get to 7 on turn 2. We don't see turn 2 Lost Impact all that often with this deck, especially going first.
Yeah, usually you have the help of something like Lost Vacuum to bump your own stadium or get rid of that Forest Seal Stone in some of those Turbo Lost Zone decks. But no sort of item card here for Dan to kind of skip those Lost Zone numbers, having to rely on Flower Selecting and Colress's Experiment alone.
It looks like Dan also has a Nest Ball in the hand currently, so that's another way he could get even more Pokemon into play here.
I think with the Nest Ball, you're going to be able to find that Radiant Greninja along with it as well.
It looks like he's thinking through what to do here. Something you can do when you have Battle VIP Pass and Nest Ball in your opening hand, as the Giratina deck, you do really want to have a lot of Pokemon in play pretty quickly. So something what you can do sometimes is just Nest Ball for the Greninja. Use concealed cards, keep the Battle VIP Pass in your hand, give yourself a chance to draw into some basic Pokemon, and then you go with the Battle VIP. But Dan at this spot doesn't feel like he needs to put too many Pokemon out. Of course, if he puts too many out, he's powering up that Raikou, giving Keaton the option to pull off a KO on that pretty quickly.
Found off this Flower Selecting, which is a pretty good attacker, but having to get rid of another supporter in that Roxanne does play 2.
Okay.
So we saw a Roxanne prize last game, but the Roxanne at the end of the game win it for Dan. So it's going to be a very powerful supporter to hopefully find later on. And we find another Giratina V here.
Yeah, double Giratina, putting a lot of respect on Keaton's deck. It's pretty difficult for Keaton to find a Boss's Orders KO on a Giratina. It is possible, however. A lot less likely when that card comes into play. We talked about it last game. Path to the Peak, extremely strong in this matchup, and that is a huge difference maker as Keaton has a Miraidon, but he's unable to use that tandem unit to get more Pokemon into play.
Yeah, even having the Ultra Ball for something like that Squawkabilly EX, but no Peony to find that stadium to be able to use that ability.
I think Keaton is going all in here. Ultra Ball gets rid of the Miraidon and the Lightning Energy. I think he's just going to get an Iron Hands. He's got 2 Generator and a Switch card in the hand. If he hits 3 energy off the Generator, he's also got a Lightning Energy. I think this is his play. He has to go for this, amp you very much. It's unlikely Dan would be able to respond to it. And that's really your only way to take a quick 2 prize cards. Now, you could be a little more conservative and go for a Miraidon attack, a Raikou attack even. So there are a few options out there for Keaton. What do you think? With all the different things he could do, what would be best?
It has to be the Iron Hands. You already discarded the Miraidon. The Raikou V is in the prize cards.
Yeah.
Only playing 1 copy of that. So
it could be another Miraidon, I guess, right?
Yeah, but you never want to discard a Miraidon to search for a Miraidon.
And worst case scenario as well, even if you do only hit 2 energy on the Generator, you still have the attachment for turn. Worst case scenario, an Arm Press still gets you the KO this turn.
You got to do what you got to do, especially in the face of a Path to the Peak, such a powerful supporter or powerful stadium card.
And that is the difference maker in this spot. Keaton would have been able to do so much with his turn if Path had not come down. Tandem unit, Squawkabilly, all those things. And that's, I think, another reason for Keaton to go first in this matchup, because Path to the Peak is so detrimental for you. A couple of big generators here incoming, Jeremy. 5 cards from the top, looking for a couple of hits. Look at that. Just sees the top 3. Doesn't even need to look at the rest.
That's what I like to see. You know, no wasting time here. You got it. You're going to be able to attach those to your bench lightning Pokemon. And just now needing one more at least from the second electric generator to be able to amp you very much on turn 1.
With one more generator to come, just needs one energy card from these 5. Let's see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Does find 2 energy. That's even better than 1. Dan can't believe it.
Well, those energies, no stranger going to that Iron Hands EX, fully powered up, and with the switch cart, we'll be able to take the knockout.
I think Dan just said, I am not even upset. Now, if Keaton could combine this with a Peony as the last card in hand, that would be incredible, but unfortunately, it is just that lightning energy. 0 cards in hand now for Keaton, 2 more from the prize cards. Taking that KO, 2 prizes. He takes the advantage, but Dan, how can he respond? 2 cards in the lost zone. Is there a path for him to realistically get to 7 here?
Not really. You would need more of those nest balls to find a Comfey, or just finding it off this course experiment. A few switching options, because there's no switching options in the hand right now. We do see a Jet Energy, but Mirage Gate,
Nest Ball.
Experiment, Nest Ball.
Pretty tough call. It is going to be Mirage Gate going down. You do play 4 copies of that card. It is extremely powerful, but with 4 copies in your list, you kind of expect to have to lost zone 1 at some point, but Dan's going to have to really think about it before he loses another.
One thing I might like to see is, if you don't have it this turn, just an Abyss Seeking.
Right.
Be able to continue to build up that lost zone with that Giratina attack and get some cards in your hand, but more importantly, it is a big HP Pokemon that you could put in front of that amp you very much, to where Keaton would not be able to take 2 prizes on the following turn.
I mean,
definitely don't want to attack with Cramorant this
Keaton
turn.
went to 0 cards in hand last turn. There's only 2 now from the prizes he took. He'll draw a card for turn. That's 3 cards. And it's pretty tough to find a 3-card combo that's going to get Keaton out of this situation. It's going to have to be like a Stadium Bump plus a Peony or a Miraidon, you know, some of those things to try to reestablish a board. And even then, even if he plays Peony, he's just going to have to go get a Mew EX in play, and he'll only get to draw 3 more cards.
Ooh, okay. This is a decision. There was the Radiant Greninja and Countercatcher.
Ooh.
Countercatcher could bring up that Zapdos and just force Keaton to find an energy to retreat and amp you very much yet again.
Yeah, I kind of like it, honestly. You're going to go for this Abyss Seeking, which is fine. You know, it's pretty unlikely anything happens to this Giratina. It lets you get closer to those 10 cards in the Lost Zone. You can pretty reasonably pull that off next turn. Try to slow your opponent down as much as possible. It will just be Abyss Seeking, though, maybe holding on to Countercatcher, depending on if Keaton benches something else this turn. I think that makes sense, too.
Well, that was a pretty easy choice there. Roxanne found off the Abyss Seeking is going to be pretty good if Keaton's able to cobble together a knockout on this following turn. But looking at the hand, Squawkabilly EX, Raikou V, and an energy. So would have found the energy to retreat that Zapdos, but nothing going on.
Can bench the the Raikou is actually going to just bench all of the Pokemon and just swing. Going to be that arm press, 160 damage. Laying some damage counters down onto this Giratina.
It's going to be 130, which is...
Oh, yeah, that's Zapdos, right?
Which is actually pretty important, because the Zapdos does 110 with Electric Ball, which would be able to take a knockout on that Giratina V if it gets evolved into a Giratina V Star.
Yeah, pretty solid math, to be honest. It's going to work out nicely for Keaton if he can find an energy card. He is just living on the top of the deck now at this point. Dan playing a Mirage Gate, able to search the deck for 2 energy cards of differing types, get them into play. Water Energy and Grass being the grabs. He needs at least 1 Grass and 1 Psychic on his Giratina V-Star if he wants to attack with it. And it does look like he has the Psychic in hand. If he has a switch cart, he can get this Giratina out of the active. He also, worst case scenario, could just manually retreat it. You don't ever love having to do that. Your energy cards are already such important resources in this deck. He does have the counter catcher to work with as well.
Switch cart would be pretty big too, and just healing off that 30 damage from the Giratina.
Would erase that relevant damage you were mentioning. Now with this Colress 5 cards, what do we see here? What is he able to lose? What does he need to make sure he hangs on to?
Seems like Jet Energy might be going to the hand, getting rid of that Path to the Peak. That would be the last Path to the Peak, hoping to rely on the one that's in play, which has been putting in a ton of work against Keaton.
And honestly, it's done its job. It's best in this matchup in those early turns because your opponent is so reliant on Squawkabilly EX. And if you're not able to use that Squawk and Seize on turn 1, Path to the Peak has kind of accomplished its main goal. So even if Keaton finds a replacement stadium, Dan is happy with the results he's gotten thus far. Now thinking of what else to play, there is that Psychic Energy. Do you see a switch card in this hand?
No, just going to manually retreat here, getting rid of those 2 energies, but bringing up that fresh Giratina V-Star. I would love to see that Star Requiem here. Just be able to take that clean knockout and keep those energy in play for the following turn.
Yeah, this worked out really nicely for Dan, getting to exactly 10 cards in the Lost Zone. He knows this Giratina's not going anywhere. There's not one single card Keaton can draw that gets him out of this situation. I do not think a Lightning Energy is the find.
When you play 17 of them, you're probably going to draw into them a lot.
Definitely makes sense. Having to debate where to potentially put it. Can't even use something like Fleet-Footed thanks to Path to the Peak being in play. He'll just pass this turn.
Path to the Peak has been putting in a ton of work. Dan now having that Jet Energy, such a good card in this deck, being able to help you freely pivot through a lot of your Comfey, your attackers, and Giratina as a deck has been utilizing this card as a 4-of for a while.
Jet Energy going to the Lost Zone. The decision was between that and a Mirage Gate. You definitely get to a point in the game where having the energy cards themselves can be more valuable than the Mirage Gates. You need to make sure you're keeping them around. But with this Raikou in the active, a Lost Impact incoming more than likely, Dan is going to jump pretty far ahead here in the prize trade.
Mirage Gate is going to attach some extra energies so you can get rid of them with that Lost Impact. Would be great to have a switch cart or even just a switch to be able to save that Jet Energy and get rid of that off that Comfey as well.
Yeah, you see that a lot from these Lost Zone players, is keeping an energy on a benched Comfey, trying to prep for some potential disruption or just a knockout so they have that guaranteed pivot on the next turn. As this Giratina V-Star is coming to the active spot and the benched Giratina V is evolving up, we are likely to see this Lost Impact take the KO. Now with 5 energy cards in play, Dan has some options of which ones to Lost Zone, and it looks like that Jet Energy is a decent choice.
Easy 2 prize cards for Dan, just 2 more until the game is done, and
another energy. Not much going here for Keaton. Just has to hit for 110 with that electric ball. Dan Hugar could close out the game on this turn. He plays 1 escape rope and 1 boss's orders. If he can find either of those cards, it's pretty likely he can close it out.
Escape rope was the first card played, maybe? No. That was last game. All right.
It might be. Yeah, the games do tend to bleed together as we get through the day here and get through so many of these events. Let's see what he has access to.
Oh, it was played,
There is an escape rope in the discard pile, so it's going to be on to just that single boss's orders. If he has it, the game is over. He doesn't have to win right here by any means, but it does get a little awkward, and I think it's what Dan is thinking about. If you lost zone 2 energy cards to KO this Zapdos, are there enough energy cards for you to close out the game?
And choosing to not get rid of the benched energy off that Giratina V-Star. And Keaton drawing Electric Generator. Can't even play it. They're going to motivate for 20
damage, not even getting the extra effect of accelerating energy to a benched Pokemon. All Dan Hugar needs is 1 energy card, and I think he has a Mirage Gate in the hand. Super Odd putting back a Psychic Energy, and that is going to be the game. Lost Impact, 2-0 victory. Dan Hugar has locked up a spot here in top 8.
Undefeated, technically, 11-0-3, 36 match points, enough to lock up a spot in that top 8, like you were saying, joining Cal Connor, maybe Azul Garcia Griego. And hey, if there's one thing Dan wants to see is more of those Snorlax in top 8.
It does look like Cal and Azul did ID, so not a concession. I think something Cal is probably thinking about is trying to avoid this guy on the left side of the table, Dan Hugar. He does not want to play against that as his Snorlax deck. It was a valiant showing from Keaton, but things just really did not materialize in the way that you would normally game plan it out as this Miraidon deck.
Iron Hands EX taking a quick 2-prize knockout off of that early Pokemon, and then Dan opting for the counter catcher on that Mew EX, taking the knockout there. And again, Keaton using Ampy very much off of that escape rope to bring up that Radiant Greninja, but Dan having the Star Requiem all ready to go, taking that knockout there, and having, more importantly, that Giratina V-Star on that bench.
Able to take that game number 1 with this final energy card. Pretty convincing fashion, honestly. And then in game number 2, it was really just Path to the Peak is really the MVP for Dan here. It shut Keaton down completely. And again, I've said it before, but it's the main reason I really would have liked to have seen Keaton gone first, just because of how strong Path is against his deck.
Yeah, he would have had a pretty stellar hand against Path of the Peak.
Gotta wonder what would have happened.
Couple Ultra Ball, that Miraidon EX already in hand, 2 electric generators. Yeah. It could have been explosive to start off, but unfortunately, going second, having that Path to the Peak in play, was not able to find Peony or those Beach Court to bump it, and just an embarrassment of energies here for the remainder of the game. Dan able to close things out with a couple lost impacts and that Star Requiem after that turn 1 Iron Hands EX.
Pretty incredible game there from Dan. You know, I've definitely been a little bit of a hater of the Giratina V-Star deck.
You are.
It's not too much of a secret, but, you know, Dan played it extremely, extremely well, and looking forward to watching him continue to make a run through this tournament. We'll see what he can come up against here as we move into these last few rounds.
Listen, it's just like any Lost Zone deck. If you don't draw Colress's Experiment, you're really not going to win those games. Giratina a little bit more so, though, because you're very reliant on hitting that 10 for, or the 7 and 10 for the Mirage Gates, the Star Requiems, and that Lost Mine from Save Alive. Yeah,
the classic Giratina play is definitely, you know, flower selecting, Abyss Seeking. I prefer to go flower selecting, Lost Vacuum, you know, Dragonite, Dragon Gale. That's where I'm kind of living at, you know.
When was the last time you top-8'd a regional?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Dan Hugar being able to make it happen with the Giratina. Got some great text in here as well. That Avery, I'd definitely be interested to hear about. That's kind of a surprising inclusion. Pretty strong against the mirror matches, I would imagine. Pretty good against things like Gardevoir as well. Charizard, I have to imagine it's pretty strong against. If you use Avery against a Charizard, you know, they're usually wanting to have their Jirachi in play. They want to have Manaphy in play because they want to protect against Sableye. They want to protect against Greninja. I mean, if you play Avery, are they going to discard some Charmanders? Probably not, right?
No, not at all. Yeah, it's definitely going to be one of those cards where it is in there for those specific matchups. This matchup, not so much. You're just going to Roxanne Path, hopefully